Beneath the main floor of Harlan and Sons, one of the most prestigious restaurant chains in downtown Chicago, sat a walk-in cold storage room few people ever spoke about. It was quiet, humming with the constant low sound of refrigeration lit by dim overhead fluorescents. The air was dry and cold. Most avoided it unless absolutely necessary. But Nora Bennett, 28, was there every day. She was a seasonal hire, part of a contracted logistics team that handled inventory and quality control. Her uniform was slightly oversized, her hair usually tied back without much care. Most thought she was just another face in a job meant to be invisible. No one upstairs knew her name. To them, she was just the girl in the storage room. But Nora did not treat the inventory like numbers on a clipboard. She studied them, tracked patterns, watched deliveries, and noticed when packaging weights shifted or barcodes were swapped. She saw what others overlooked. Late one Thursday afternoon, just before closing, a red flag in the accounting report made its way to upper management. One of the subsidiary locations reported a loss in inventory that did not match any recorded order. The numbers were off by thousands of dollars. And so Connor Whitman, the newly appointed executive director, was called in. At 35, Connor had the kind of reputation that came before him: stern, intelligent. Raised within the company but seasoned abroad, he had spent years streamlining operations across Europe before returning to take over his father's legacy. When he stepped into the storage room that evening, the fluorescent light flickered overhead. Nora was sitting at an old laptop in the far corner, typing quietly, wearing gloves with a small tear at the seam. She looked up, startled, but not afraid. Connor frowned as he noticed her screen. "What are you doing with that data?" he asked, voice firm. "I'm cross-referencing internal delivery schedules with export logs," she said calmly. "There's a mismatch in the declared weight-to-unit ratios on the Thursday shipments." Connor walked over. His eyes scanned her spreadsheet's charts and a breakdown of discrepancies across 4 locations. She had mapped out the flow of inventory with detailed notes, something no one had done. The exact thing their accounting team had failed to identify. He stared at the screen in silence. "What did you study?" he asked finally. "Systems analysis, UC Berkeley." "But I didn't finish." "Why not? My father died. My mother needed care. I started working." There was no anger in her tone, no self-pity, just the truth. And for the first time in a very long time, Connor Whitman found himself speechless, not because of some executive negotiation or boardroom strategy, but because of a woman in a freezing basement with garlic powder on her sleeve, and a brain faster than most analysts he had ever hired. Connor left the cold storage room without another word that day. But the next morning, at exactly 9:02 a.m., Nora received an email from a restricted internal address. It simply said, "Report to floor 5, room 504. Bring your files." No signature, no explanation. Nora hesitated. She had never been above the service floor. The 5th level was where corporate operations lived: supply chain analysts, digital systems, managers, strategy coordinators. Everyone wore tailored jackets and shoes that did not squeak. She wore sneakers that had long lost their shape. Still, she went. Room 504 turned out to be a glass-walled meeting space with one long white table. Sunlight poured in from tall windows, making everything feel too bright. Inside, waiting, was Connor. He stood as she entered. "Sit." Nora sat. He placed a printed chart in front of her. "This is the same anomaly you showed me yesterday. Our entire system uses automated inputs from our partners. We thought the issue was on their side. You proved it wasn't." He folded his hands. "How did you see it?" Nora glanced at the chart. The decimals were too exact. Real-world shipping always involves slight variance. The system showed perfect repetition for 4 weeks. That doesn't happen unless it's being overwritten. Connor blinked. You're not just good. You're precise. She didn't answer. Instead, she waited. He slid a contract toward her. Temporary data analyst. Shadow role duration. 3 weeks. Access level limited. Administrative compensation adjusted hourly. I want to see what else you find, he said. Quietly. You'll still clock in through the vendor. No one needs to know. Nora stared at the contract. I'm not here for a promotion. Good. I'm not offering one. I'm offering opportunity. And so it began. Nora worked her regular shifts, then slipped upstairs for 2 hours each afternoon. Connor gave her read-only access to restricted analytics. Within 3 days, she flagged 2 more inconsistencies. One in vendor pricing manipulation, the other in outdated refrigeration data that could have led to health violations. He never praised her out loud, but every time he slid a file toward her, there was something quieter than praise. It was trust. One day, while reviewing supply chain movement for the Western locations, Nora noticed a locked segment in the data. Not encrypted, just missing. She flagged it with a red marker and left a post-it. Why is this entry blank for 5 consecutive days? The next morning, the post-it was gone. In its place, a single paperclip sat on top of her file. No words, but she understood. They were being watched. Nora stopped sleeping properly. Every night she replayed the data in her head like pieces of a broken puzzle. Something wasn't right, and not just with the numbers. The silence around her discoveries was too practiced, too intentional. Who was erasing data? Who was benefiting from what she was finding? And why was Connor not asking the same questions? Or was he? The following week, Connor sent her a folder marked only with a small black triangle in the corner. No title, no label. Inside were financial transfers, seemingly ordinary payments from Harlan & Sons to their third-party vendors. But when Nora cross-referenced them with internal timestamps and shipping logs, one name kept surfacing. Avery Slate Logistics, a company that no one in accounting could explain, and that had no physical address. Nora dug deeper. She found an archived file from 5 years ago showing that Avery Slate had been removed from the approved vendor list after a fraud alert, but somehow it had returned 2 years ago under a slightly modified name. No one had noticed, or pretended not to. The payments to Avery Slate totaled $12 million over 16 months. Nora took a deep breath. She had walked into this job for hourly wages and frozen storage bins. Now she was staring at the digital blueprint of corporate theft. She printed the findings and placed them in a clean manila folder. When she reached room 504 that afternoon, Connor was already there, coat-off sleeves rolled dark circles under his eyes. He looked up as she entered. She said nothing, just handed him the file. He flipped through the pages in silence, then looked up. You found it. She nodded. You knew something already, she said. I suspected, but I had no proof, until now. Nora folded her arms. What happens next? Connor exhaled slowly. That depends on how brave we are. That night, as Nora rode the train home, a strange fear crept in. She had always told herself she was okay staying in the background, that safety came with invisibility, that being unnoticed meant being untouchable. But now her name was on a file that could collapse departments. Now someone powerful might want her to stay quiet. And for the first time, she didn't want to be invisible anymore. 3 days passed. The headquarters of Harlan & Sons felt unusually quiet. Too many closed doors, too many hushed voices. People from corporate began showing up unannounced in elevators Nora never took. She started noticing a shift, not in sound, but in silence. Then it happened. A memo was sent to all department leads. An internal audit was being launched. No one was named, no details were given, but everyone knew what it meant. Something serious had been uncovered. That afternoon, Connor called her into room 504. His posture was tense, as if he had not slept. He gestured for her to sit, then placed two documents side by side on the table. One was the report she had written, now stamped with a red confidential watermark. The other was a non-disclosure agreement. "I need you to sign this," he said quietly. Nora stared at the page. "You're shutting it down." "No," he replied. "I'm escalating it. But not everyone wants that. If your name is linked to this, Nora, it won't be just emails and meetings. It'll be legal letters, threats, maybe worse." She folded her hands on the table. "And you? I'll protect the findings, but I can't protect you unless you're willing to stand behind them." The room was still. Nora's mind drifted to her mother's hospital room, the unpaid bills, the job interviews she never finished. The way people used to say, "You're too smart to waste your time in back rooms," without ever offering her a way out. She looked at the NDA again. Then she pushed it away. "No," she said. "If they're going to erase me, they'll have to do it to my face." Connor didn't smile, but something in his expression changed. Respect, maybe. Or something quieter. "I thought you'd say that," he said. Then he handed her a small black access badge. Temporary. Limited clearance, but not invisible. The next morning, her name appeared on the company directory. Nora Bennett, Independent Data Consultant Special Assignment. Most people walked by it without noticing, but a few didn't, and some of them started to look nervous. One even whispered, "She's the one." Nora heard it. She kept walking. The internal review board hearing was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Held in the company's top-floor conference room, a space usually reserved for shareholder meetings and executive briefings, the hearing had been called routine in official emails. But everyone knew this was no routine matter. Nora had never been on that floor before. As the elevator opened, the walls were glass, the ceiling high, the windows framing the skyline like a painting. Connor stood waiting. He didn't say much, just nodded and handed her a thin folder. "You don't need to speak," he said. "Just be in the room." But she knew better. The hearing began with pleasantries, corporate language, vague numbers. A compliance officer read out Connor's statement about anomalies and unusual activity within the company's procurement systems. Then someone asked, "Who exactly identified this?" Connor turned slightly. Nora stood up before he could speak. "I did," she said, steady and clear. "My name is Nora Bennett. I work in your storage department." Or I did until I saw a mistake. And then I saw another. And then I saw $12 million disappearing. She walked to the screen at the front of the room. "I'm not an executive. I'm not even a full employee. But I know patterns. I know when something is hidden too well." She clicked the remote Connor had handed her. Slides appeared. Flowcharts, discrepancies, red flags layered over spreadsheets. Someone on the board interrupted her. "Are you a certified analyst?" "No," she said. "I'm just the one who figured out what no one else could." Silence. Until the board chair leaned forward. "What do you want?" "Ms. Bennett." Nora looked at Connor, then back at the chair. "I want your company to stop pretending that titles equal talent," she said. "I want people like me to be heard, not hidden." A pause. Then the chair nodded once. "Thank you," he said. "You may sit." The story didn't break publicly, not at first. The company handled things quietly. But inside the organization, everything changed. Avery Slate Logistics was removed permanently. 2 executives were asked to resign. A new ethics protocol was put in place for anonymous internal reporting. And Nora was offered a permanent role. Nora didn't accept the job right away. The title was Generous Lead Integrity Analyst. The salary was more than she'd ever imagined earning. An office with windows, a team, full benefits. Her mother cried when she heard. But Nora hesitated. Not because she didn't want it, but because she needed to be sure she wanted it for the right reasons. She walked back to the storage room that had once defined her whole life. Same humming machines, same chill in the air, same steel shelves. She touched the clipboard still hanging by the door. It still had her old initials, NB, next to dates and numbers no one remembered. Then she folded the paper, tucked it into her pocket, and walked out. 2 weeks later, she returned to the company, not with gloves and a clipboard, but in a blazer and her own name on the digital directory. Nora Bennett. Lead analyst, internal systems people looked at her differently. Some nodded respectfully, others avoided her gaze. She didn't need their approval. She had already earned her voice. One evening, as she passed the break room, Connor stood near the coffee machine reading a file. He looked up. Settled in, yet he asked. Almost, she said, smiling. He paused, then said something he hadn't said before. "You saved this company, Nora." She tilted her head. "No," she replied. "You let someone save it. That counts for something too." He nodded. Then he handed her a small flash drive. "No data on this one," he said. "It's just a thank you. If you ever want to build something of your own one day, consider it seed capital." She looked down at it. Simple. Silver. Unlabeled. He walked away without waiting for her answer. Months later, the story quietly made its way into an internal newsletter, not the full truth, but enough. A new internal training program was launched based on Nora's pattern method. She taught junior staff how to see what others ignored, how to listen to silence, how to trust what they noticed even if no one else did. And once, when a younger analyst asked her what her real background was, she simply said, "I used to be invisible. That's the only credential I needed."